The email notification pinged at exactly 9:13 a.m. Daniel Chen sat in his cramped cubicle on the 14th floor of Meridian Tech Solutions, watching the morning sun slice through the Venetian blinds and paint golden bars across his keyboard. He'd been staring at the same line of code for 20 minutes, his mind elsewhere, calculating mortgage payments and his daughter's upcoming tuition fees. The coffee in his mug had gone cold an hour ago, a thin film forming on its surface like ice on a winter pond. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Daniel, Marcus wants to see you. Now. The voice belonged to Jennifer Park, the HR director whose smile never quite reached her eyes. She stood at the entrance to his cubicle, her posture rigid, clutching a manila folder against her chest like a shield. Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd seen that folder before, watched it appear in the hands of 3 colleagues over the past 6 months, each one escorted out by security within the hour. "Is this about the Silverman account?" Daniel asked, already knowing it wasn't. Jennifer's silence was answer enough. The walk to Marcus Holloway's corner office felt like a funeral procession. Daniel passed the faces of colleagues who suddenly found their screens fascinating, their keyboards urgently demanding attention. Only Tom Rodriguez, the junior developer Daniel had mentored for 2 years, met his eyes. The younger man's expression was a mixture of sympathy and relief that the axe hadn't fallen on him this time. Marcus Holloway's office occupied the northeast corner of the building, a glass-walled kingdom with a view of the city skyline that cost more in rent than Daniel made in 3 months. Marcus sat behind a desk of polished mahogany, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit tailored to disguise the softness that came from too many expense account dinners. At 48, he'd built Meridian Tech from a garage startup into a $50 million company, and he'd done it by being ruthless when ruthlessness was required. "Sit down, Daniel." Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. His fingers continued typing, each keystroke a small assertion of power, a reminder of who controlled this moment. Daniel sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, the kind that was deliberately designed to sit lower than Marcus's throne. Through the window behind Marcus, he could see construction cranes dotting the skyline, new buildings rising while others fell. 12 years, Daniel said quietly. "I've given this company 12 years. Marcus finally looked up, and his expression held no malice, which somehow made it worse. There was simply nothing there. No regret, no appreciation, no acknowledgement of shared history. Daniel might as well have been a line item on a spreadsheet, a number being adjusted for optimal efficiency. "And we've compensated you fairly for those 12 years, Marcus replied. "But the market's changing, Daniel. We need to pivot. The board wants younger talent, fresh perspectives, people who understand cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs, all the emerging technologies that are reshaping our industry. I taught myself Python in 6 weeks when you needed that database overhaul," Daniel said, feeling heat rise in his chest. "I worked 80-hour weeks on the Morrison project. I canceled my daughter's birthday trip to Florida because you needed someone to manage the West Coast clients. And we appreciated all of that." Marcus opened the manila folder Jennifer had handed him. Inside were documents, forms, the administrative apparatus of termination. "You'll receive 8 weeks of severance. That's generous, considering we could legally offer you nothing. Your benefits continue through the end of next month. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. 8 weeks. 8 weeks to find a new job in a market flooded with younger, cheaper developers who'd work for half his salary and twice his hours. 8 weeks to figure out how to pay for Emma's college applications, the mortgage on a house that was worth less than he owed, the car that needed new brakes, the medical bills from his wife Rachel's surgery last year. The Kensington project, Daniel heard himself say. I created the entire architecture. The prototype that landed us that $20 million contract was my design, which the company owns, per your employment contract. Marcus slid a paper across the desk. You signed this on your first day. All intellectual property created during your employment belongs to Meridian Tech, page 7, paragraph 3. Daniel stared at the paper, at his own signature from 12 years ago, young and optimistic, the handwriting of a man who'd believed hard work and loyalty meant something. The signature looked like it belonged to a stranger. "Is there anything else?" Marcus asked, his hand hovering over his mouse, ready to return to more important matters. Daniel stood. His legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. "Yes, one question." Marcus waited. "Do you remember the night we debugged the Anderson system? 3 years ago, the server crash that would have cost us everything? We stayed here until 4 in the morning, eating cold pizza and drinking Red Bull, and when we finally got it working, you told me I was the best programmer you'd ever known. You said you couldn't do this without me." For just a moment, something flickered across Marcus's face. Memory, perhaps, or the ghost of the man he'd been before corner offices and board meetings had calcified his heart. "That was 3 years ago," Marcus said quietly. "Things change." The security guard waiting outside Marcus's office was named Paul, a 60-year-old former cop with kind eyes who'd always asked about Emma's soccer games. Now he couldn't meet Daniel's gaze as he escorted him back to his cubicle, standing silent watch as Daniel packed 12 years into a cardboard box. Photos of Emma, gap-toothed at 6, proud in her graduation gown at 18, fierce on the soccer field. A coffee mug Rachel had given him that read "World's Best Dad" in Emma's childhood handwriting. The small succulent plant Tom had given him as a joke, somehow still alive despite Daniel's neglect. The clock on his computer screen read 9:15 a.m. Tom appeared as Daniel was unplugging his phone charger. The young developer's face was flushed, angry in a way Daniel appreciated but couldn't afford to share. "This is bullshit," Tom whispered. "You taught me everything. Without you, I'd still be writing amateur code." "Take care of yourself," Daniel told him. "And Tom, when they ask you to work weekends, when they tell you it's for the team, for the family, remember this moment. Remember that loyalty is a one-way street." The elevator ride down felt endless. Paul stood beside him, silent and ashamed. Daniel watched the floor numbers descend, each one a year of his life dropping away. 14th floor. The year Emma was born, when he'd promised Rachel they'd build something stable, something secure. 10th floor. The promotion that never quite came with the salary bump he'd been promised. 6th floor. Rachel's cancer scare, the terror of possibly losing everything that mattered. Ground floor. Now, this moment, standing in a lobby with a box of personal effects and no clear path forward. Outside, the September morning was crisp and bright, the kind of day that belonged in a commercial for expensive watches or luxury cars. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, watching people hurry past with their coffee cups and purposeful strides, all of them certain of their destinations. A food truck on the corner sold breakfast burritos, the smell of eggs and peppers mixing with exhaust fumes. Across the street, a new coffee shop was opening, young entrepreneurs hanging a hand-painted sign. Daniel pulled out his phone. 9:18 a.m. 3 minutes since his life had imploded. He had 8 weeks of severance, a mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, Emma's first college tuition bill arriving in January. He had 12 years of experience that Marcus had just declared obsolete. He had a wife who'd stood by him through everything and a daughter who believed her father could fix anything. And he had something else, something that had been germinating in the back of his mind for months, maybe years. A ghost of an idea that Marcus's betrayal had just crystallized into sharp, brilliant clarity. Daniel opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 18 months. Victor Huang, a venture capitalist who'd once offered to fund Daniel's independent projects if he ever left Meridian. Daniel had declined then, loyal to a fault, devoted to a company that had just thrown him away like outdated software. His finger hovered over the call button. In his cardboard box, beneath the photos and the coffee mug, was a flash drive. On that drive was code, elegant, revolutionary code that Daniel had written on his own time, on his own laptop, using his own resources. Code that had nothing to do with Meridian Tech's intellectual property. Code that could change everything. The Kensington project had been Marcus's prize, the golden goose that had made Meridian Tech a major player. But Daniel knew its weakness. He'd built it, after all. He knew every vulnerability, every shortcut Marcus had insisted on despite Daniel's warnings about security and scalability. He knew that in 6 months, maybe a year, those shortcuts would become cracks, and those cracks would become canyons. And he knew how to build something better. Daniel pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, Victor's voice came through, warm and curious. "Daniel Chen, this is unexpected." "Victor, do you remember that conversation we had about predictive analytics and machine learning integration for mid-sized business applications?" "Of course. You said you had ideas that were 5 years ahead of anything on the market." Daniel watched the Meridian Tech building's glass facade reflect the morning sun, a monument to Marcus's empire, built on the backs of people like him, people who'd believed that talent and dedication mattered, people who hadn't understood that in Marcus's world, everyone was disposable. "I'm ready to talk," Daniel said. "How soon can you meet?" "I can be downtown in 30 minutes. There's a coffee shop on 5th and Main, Moonbeam Cafe. Know it? I'll find it." Daniel ended the call and stood for a moment longer, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not since he'd been a young programmer with more ambition than sense, before mortgages and responsibilities had taught him to play it safe. It felt like electricity, like possibility, like the particular recklessness that comes when you have nothing left to lose. He started walking toward 5th and Main, his cardboard box under one arm, his phone in his other hand, already pulling up the Notes app where he'd been sketching his ideas. The morning sun was warm on his face. The city noise, traffic, construction, humanity, felt like a symphony of potential. At 9:15 a.m., Marcus Holloway had fired him, discarded him, declared him obsolete. At 9:18 a.m., Daniel Chen had decided to prove him catastrophically wrong. The Moonbeam Cafe was exactly the kind of place Daniel never had time to visit during his Meridian years. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, the smell of fresh ground coffee and artisan pastries, indie music playing just loud enough to create ambience without overwhelming conversation. Young people hunched over laptops, probably building the next great startup or writing the next great novel. Daniel felt simultaneously ancient and newborn as he found a table in the back corner. Victor Huang arrived exactly 28 minutes after their call, proving that punctuality was still a virtue in the venture capital world. At 53, Victor looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine profile. Slim-cut suit, minimal jewelry, the kind of calculated casual that cost more than it appeared. But his handshake was genuine, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd made his fortune by recognizing potential before it became obvious. "You sounded different on the phone," Victor said, settling into the chair across from Daniel. "Focused. Dangerous, maybe. I got fired 2 hours ago." "Ah." Victor's expression shifted, understanding blooming. Marcus finally pulled the trigger. "I heard rumors he was cutting senior staff. 12 years of my life, gone in a 15-minute conversation." Daniel pushed his cardboard box aside. "He told me I was obsolete, that the company needed fresh perspectives. And you disagreed. I know something Marcus doesn't." Daniel leaned forward. "The Kensington project, the one that made Meridian Tech a major player, it's built on a foundation of shortcuts and compromises. Marcus pushed for speed over sustainability. I warned him, documented my concerns, but he wanted it shipped. In 6 months, maybe less, that system is going to start showing cracks. And when clients start experiencing failures, when data breaches become inevitable, Meridian's reputation will crumble." Victor ordered an espresso from the passing waiter, never breaking eye contact with Daniel. "You're not just here to tell me about Marcus's mistakes." "No." Daniel pulled out his personal laptop, the one that had nothing to do with Meridian Tech. "I'm here because I've been developing something better. On my own time, my own equipment, completely separate from any Meridian intellectual property. A business management platform that combines predictive analytics, machine learning, and intuitive user interfaces in ways that current systems can't match. It's designed for mid-sized companies, businesses that are too large for basic software, but too small to afford enterprise solutions." He opened his laptop and pulled up his prototype. The interface was clean, elegant, powerful. Everything the Kensington project should have been if Marcus hadn't sacrificed quality for quarterly profits. Victor studied the screen, his expression unreadable. Daniel had made his fortune in Silicon Valley before returning to the East Coast, had seen thousands of pitches from hopeful entrepreneurs. He knew bullshit when he saw it, and more importantly, he knew brilliance. "Show me the architecture," Victor said quietly. For the next 90 minutes, Daniel walked Victor through his creation. The cafe noise faded away as he explained his approach to data integration, his solutions for scalability problems that plagued existing systems, his innovative methods for cybersecurity that didn't sacrifice user experience. He showed Victor the market analysis he'd been conducting, the gap he'd identified between available solutions and actual business needs. "The market size?" Victor asked. "Conservative estimate, 30,000 mid-sized companies in North America alone, who are currently using inadequate systems or stitching together incompatible software solutions. Average contract value of 60,000 annually. That's a potential market of 1.8 billion. Competition. Meridian Tech is the obvious one, but they're locked into their existing architecture. It would take them 2 years and a complete rebuild to match what I'm offering. By then, we'd have first-mover advantage and established client relationships. The other competitors are either too expensive, too complicated, or too limited in scope." Victor sat back, his espresso forgotten and cooling. "Why now, Daniel? You could have done this years ago." It was the question Daniel had been asking himself during the walk from Meridian's building to this cafe. Why now? Why not 5 years ago when Emma was younger and the financial pressure was less? Why not 2 years ago, when Rachel first suggested he was wasting his talent working for someone else? "Fear," Daniel said simply. "I had a steady paycheck, benefits, the illusion of security. I had a family depending on me. Starting something new felt like gambling with their futures." He paused, looking down at his hands. Hands that had typed millions of lines of code, fixed countless problems, built systems that had made other people wealthy. "But Marcus taught me something this morning. That security was always an illusion. Loyalty meant nothing. Safety was just a comfortable cage." "And now you're free," Victor said. "Now I'm free," Daniel agreed. "And angry. And motivated by something stronger than fear, the need to prove that I wasn't obsolete. That the years I spent building someone else's dreams weren't wasted if I can use that knowledge to build something better." Victor pulled out his phone and made a call. "Sarah, clear my afternoon. I've got something that needs immediate attention." He ended the call and looked at Daniel. "I want you to meet my partners. We have a meeting at 2 o'clock. Can you be there?" Daniel thought about the severance package Marcus had offered. 8 weeks of his current salary. Barely enough to cover 2 months of expenses. He thought about job applications and interviews, about explaining to potential employers why he'd been fired, about competing with programmers half his age who'd work for half his salary. Then he thought about the code on his laptop, the potential humming beneath his fingers, the chance to build something that was entirely his own. "I'll be there," he said. Victor stood, leaving cash on the table for both their orders. "Daniel, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen thousands of pitches. Most are garbage, wishful thinking from people who don't understand markets or technology or human nature. But every so often, I see something real, something that could actually change things." He held out his hand. "What you showed me today is real. The question is whether you're ready for what comes next. Because if we do this, if my partners agree to fund you, your life is going to change in ways you can't imagine. You'll work harder than you ever worked at Meridian. You'll risk everything. You'll probably fail a dozen times before you succeed. And Marcus Holloway is going to try to destroy you." Daniel shook Victor's hand, feeling the weight of the commitment he was making. "I spent 12 years building Marcus's dream. I think it's time I built my own." Victor smiled, the first genuine smile Daniel had seen since arriving at the cafe. 2 o'clock. Hamilton Tower, 15th floor. Don't be late. After Victor left, Daniel sat alone in the Moonbeam Cafe, staring at his laptop screen. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How's work? Emma wants to know if you can help her with college essay tonight." Daniel started to type a response, then stopped. How did he explain that work had imploded, that their financial security had evaporated, that he was about to embark on the riskiest venture of his life? How did he tell his wife that instead of finding a safe, stable job, he was going to compete directly with his former employer, putting everything they had on the line. He called instead. Rachel answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar, the voice that had talked him through panic attacks and celebrated small victories, that had whispered encouragement during Emma's difficult birth and held him when his father died. "Hey, shouldn't you be in some meeting? Rach, I need to tell you something." The warmth in her voice shifted to concern. "What happened?" "Marcus fired me this morning. 8 weeks severance, and then I'm on my own." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Rachel spoke, her voice steady, controlled. "Okay, we knew this might happen. We'll figure it out. You'll find something better." "I already found something better." Daniel took a breath. "I'm starting my own company. Victor Huang is interested in funding it. I have a meeting with his partners in a few hours." Another silence, longer this time. Daniel could picture Rachel standing in their kitchen, probably leaning against the counter they'd refinished together 5 years ago, processing this information, calculating risks and possibilities with the practical mind that had kept their family afloat through every crisis. "Is this the project you've been working on?" she asked finally. "The one you wouldn't let me see?" "Yes." "Is it good?" "It's better than good, Rach. It's revolutionary. It's everything the Kensington project should have been." "Will it work?" That was the question, wasn't it? Will it work? Not could it work or should it work, but will it? A question that demanded certainty in a world built on uncertainty. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But I know that if I don't try, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. I'll take some safe job at another company and watch them make the same mistakes Marcus made. And I'll be too scared to speak up because I'll remember this day. Remember being fired for not being valuable enough. And I can't live like that anymore." "What do you need from me?" Rachel asked, and in those 6 words, Daniel heard everything he'd fallen in love with 19 years ago. Her strength, her partnership, her refusal to panic in the face of uncertainty. "I need you to trust me," he said. "And I need you to be honest if this becomes too much. We'll risk a lot if we do this. The savings we've built, our stability, maybe the house if things go really wrong. I won't do this if you're not completely on board. Are you asking my permission or my opinion?" "Both. Either. Everything." He heard her moving, probably walking to the window that looked out over their backyard, where Emma had learned to ride a bike, where they'd hosted countless barbecues and birthday parties. "Do you remember when we got married?" Rachel said. "At the reception, your father pulled me aside. He told me that you were the smartest person he'd ever known, but that you were also afraid of your own intelligence. Afraid of being too much, wanting too much, reaching too far. He said the best thing I could do was remind you that playing it safe isn't the same as being happy." Daniel felt his throat tighten. His father had died 8 years ago, taking with him decades of accumulated wisdom and observations that Daniel was still discovering, like gifts left behind to be opened at exactly the right moment. "He was right," Rachel continued. "You've been playing it safe for 12 years, Daniel. You've been building other people's dreams while your own gathered dust. So yes, I'm scared. Yes, this is risky. But I married a man who taught himself to code because he wanted to solve impossible problems. I didn't marry someone who plays it safe. So go to your meeting. Build your company. Beat Marcus Holloway at his own game. And when you come home tonight, we'll figure out the practical details together." "I love you," Daniel said. Inadequate words for an overwhelming emotion. "I know. Now go change the world. And Daniel, make him regret ever letting you go." Daniel ended the call and checked his watch. 12:47 p.m. He had an hour and 13 minutes before the meeting that would determine his future. Time enough to refine his pitch, to review his market analysis, to prepare for questions Victor's partners would inevitably ask. Instead, he opened a new document and began writing. Not code this time, but words, a vision statement for a company that didn't exist yet, a declaration of principles for a business he was building from scratch. He wrote about integrity and innovation, about building systems that actually served their users instead of just extracting profit. He wrote about creating a workplace where talent was valued and loyalty was mutual. He wrote about everything Meridian Tech had failed to be. At the top of the document, he typed a name, Phoenix Systems. because from the ashes of Marcus's betrayal, something new was rising. The Hamilton Tower's 15th floor looked like every other venture capital office Daniel had imagined but never visited. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than a car, and an air of purposeful efficiency that suggested time was the only currency that truly mattered here. A receptionist with perfect posture and a tablet instead of a desk phone directed Daniel to a conference room where Victor waited with two partners. "Daniel Chen, meet Margaret Winters and James Coe," Victor said. Margaret was perhaps 60, silver hair cut short, wearing a navy suit that radiated authority. James was younger, maybe 40, with the lean intensity of someone who survived on ambition and cold brew coffee. Margaret specializes in B2B software ventures. James handles our tech portfolio. They've reviewed the materials I sent them. "Materials?" Daniel asked, settling into a chair that was somehow both uncomfortable and expensive. "I recorded our conversation at the cafe," Victor said without apology. "Time is money, and I wanted them to hear your pitch firsthand rather than my interpretation of it." Daniel should have been bothered by this, but he found he wasn't. In Victor's world, consent was probably assumed, and efficiency trumped courtesy. "You said the Kensington project has 6 months before it fails," Margaret said, diving straight into business. "That's a specific timeline. What's your confidence level?" 85%, Daniel replied. "The system uses a database architecture that doesn't scale well beyond a certain user load. Marcus insisted on it because it was faster to implement, but I documented my concerns about the long-term viability. Right now, Meridian's clients are within the safe parameters, but they're growing and the Kensington system can't grow with them. When they hit critical mass, and based on Meridian's client acquisition rate, that's about 6 months away, they'll start experiencing slowdowns, data corruption, possibly complete system failures." "You documented your concerns," James said. "Does that documentation still exist?" "Emails, design reviews, technical specifications, all stored on Meridian servers, where I can't access them anymore. But I remember every word of every argument I made. And I can recreate the technical analysis that shows why the architecture is fundamentally flawed." Margaret leaned back, fingers steepled. "Let's talk about your solution. You claim your platform can handle clients of any size. That's a significant claim." For the next 40 minutes, Daniel walked them through his architecture, his approach to scalability, his solutions for the problems that plagued existing systems. He showed them his prototype, demonstrated features that didn't exist in any competitor's platform, explained his methodology for continuous improvement based on user feedback. James asked about security protocols. Margaret questioned his pricing model. Victor challenged his timeline for development. Daniel answered every question, feeling more confident with each response, realizing that 12 years at Meridian hadn't just taught him to code. They taught him to think strategically about markets and clients and problems. Finally, Margaret stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "I did some research after Victor sent me your materials. 12 years at Meridian Tech, consistently excellent performance reviews, promoted 3 times. Then suddenly terminated with minimal severance. That's not standard procedure even in a tech company. Why did Marcus really fire you?" Daniel considered lying, offering some sanitized corporate explanation. But these people hadn't built their fortunes by believing comfortable fictions. "Because I knew too much," Daniel said. "I knew the Kensington project was doomed. I knew Marcus was selling clients a system that would fail them. And eventually he knew I knew. Firing me now, before the failures start happening, protects him. If I'm gone, I can't say I told you so. I can't testify about what I warned him. I'm just a disgruntled ex-employee with sour grapes. Except now you're planning to compete with him," James said. "That changes the narrative. Now you're not just disgruntled, you're a threat. Marcus will come after you. He'll claim you stole intellectual property. He'll tie you up in lawsuits that could drain your funding before you ever reach market." "I know," Daniel said. "I've thought about that. Every line of code in my platform was written on my personal equipment on my own time, using methodologies that are completely different from Meridian's approach. I kept meticulous records, timestamps, version histories, development logs, everything provable. Marcus can claim whatever he wants, but I can prove I developed this independently. Can you? Margaret turned from the window, her expression unreadable. Or are you just confident you can? Because there's a difference, and that difference could cost us millions if you're wrong. Daniel met her gaze, refusing to look away. I'm not wrong, and I'm not desperate. If you don't want to fund this, I'll find someone else. What I won't do is compromise my vision to make you feel more comfortable. I spent 12 years compromising for Marcus Holloway. I'm done with that. The room went silent. Victor's expression was carefully neutral. James looked shocked. Margaret's face was stone. Then Margaret smiled, a real smile, not the polite professional mask Daniel had seen earlier. Good. Victor said you sounded dangerous this morning. I'm glad to see he was right, because if you're going to take on Marcus Holloway, you need to be more than talented. You need to be willing to fight. She returned to the table and opened a folder Daniel hadn't noticed before. Inside were documents, contracts, the legal architecture of a business arrangement. Here's what we're proposing. $2 million initial funding in exchange for 30% equity. That gives you 18 months to build your platform, acquire your first clients, and prove market viability. At that point, we'll evaluate and potentially offer additional funding for expansion. $2 million. 18 months. 30% equity. Daniel's mind raced, calculating possibilities. $2 million was more than enough to hire a small team, rent office space, build the infrastructure for a real company. 18 months was aggressive but doable. 30% equity meant he'd retain majority control, but he'd also be accountable to partners who expected results. I'll need to hire staff, Daniel said. Developers, a business manager, maybe marketing help. Hire whoever you need, Victor said. But I'd suggest starting lean. 3 or 4 really good people are worth more than 20 mediocre ones. I know exactly who I want, Daniel said, thinking of Tom Rodriguez and the loyalty in the young developer's eyes that morning. Thinking of Maria Santos, the brilliant UX designer who'd been laid off from Meridian 6 months ago. Thinking of others who'd been discarded or overlooked, people with talent and hunger and something to prove. There's one more condition, Margaret said. We want regular progress reports. Monthly meetings where you demonstrate advancement, client acquisition, problem solving. We're not going to micromanage you, but we need to know our investment is being used wisely. That's fair, Daniel agreed. James slid the contracts across the table. Our lawyers drew these up after Victor's call. They're standard venture capital agreements. Read them carefully, consult with an attorney if you want, but we need an answer by Monday. Time is critical if we're going to beat Meridian to market. Daniel picked up the first contract, scanning the dense legal language. Representations and warranties, intellectual property clauses, termination conditions, dispute resolution procedures. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exactly what he wanted. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. I'll have an answer by Monday morning, he said. One last thing, Victor said as Daniel gathered the contracts. Have you thought about location? Office space. Not specifically. Somewhere affordable, I guess. Somewhere with good internet and enough room for a team. Victor exchanged glances with his partners. There's a co-working space on 3rd Street. Modern facility, flexible leases, all the infrastructure you'd need. They have a suite available immediately. Space for 10 people, conference room, kitchen. It's 2 blocks from Meridian Tech's building. Daniel felt a slow smile spread across his face. You want me to set up shop in Marcus's backyard? I want him to watch you succeed, Victor corrected. I want him to see your company growing while his crumbles. I want him to understand that the obsolete programmer he fired is the reason his empire falls. That's petty, Daniel said. Yes, Margaret agreed. But it's also strategic. You're going to recruit people from Meridian, we all know that. Having an office nearby makes it easy for them to interview with you. Makes it easy for them to see that there are alternatives to Marcus's leadership. And when the Kensington project starts failing, when Marcus's clients start looking for better solutions, You'll be right there, visible and viable. It was manipulation and strategy and revenge all wrapped in a business plan. It was exactly the kind of calculated ruthlessness that Daniel had always avoided, the kind of behavior that had made him uncomfortable when he'd seen Marcus employ it. But Marcus had fired him without hesitation, had discarded 12 years of loyalty like it meant nothing. Marcus had made this personal. Daniel stood, tucking the contracts under his arm. The office on 3rd Street sounds perfect. Thank you. He shook hands with each partner. Margaret's grip firm and brief, James's calculating and cool, Victor's warm and congratulatory. Then he walked out of the Hamilton Tower into an afternoon that had grown cloudy, the September sky promising rain by evening. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom Rodriguez. Heard what happened. Total BS. Let me know if I can help. Daniel called him immediately. Tom answered on the first ring, his voice uncertain. Hey Daniel. Man, I'm sorry about this morning. It's not right. Tom, are you happy at Meridian? Daniel asked. What? I mean, it's a job. Why? Because I'm starting a company. A real company, built on principles that actually matter. I have funding, a vision, and 18 months to prove I can build something better than anything Marcus Holloway ever dreamed of. I need a lead developer. Someone I trust. Someone talented. Someone who's not afraid of hard work. Silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of Tom's breathing, quick and excited. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Not in equity, not yet at least, but in building something that matters. The pay will be competitive, the hours will be brutal, and there's a real chance we'll fail spectacularly. But if we succeed, if we pull this off, you'll be able to say you were there from the beginning. That you helped create something that changed the industry. When do I start? Monday morning, 9 a.m. There's a co-working space on 3rd Street. I'll text you the address. Daniel, I'm in. Whatever you need, I'm in. After ending the call, Daniel made 3 more. Maria Santos, the UX designer, answered immediately and said yes before he'd finished explaining. Kevin Park, a database architect who'd left Meridian in frustration 2 years ago, listened to the pitch and agreed to meet for coffee the next morning. And Sarah Chen, no relation to Daniel, a business operations specialist who'd been vocal about Meridian's mismanagement, practically shouted her acceptance over the phone. By the time Daniel reached his car, he had the core of a team. By the time he pulled into his driveway at 6:30 p.m., he had a company. Rachel met him at the door, Emma standing behind her. They'd clearly been discussing the situation, mother and daughter unified in their concern and support. Emma was 19 now, home for the weekend from her freshman year at State, and she looked at her father with an expression that mixed worry with excitement. Did you do it? Rachel asked. Did you really start a company? Daniel set down his cardboard box, the physical remnant of his Meridian life, and pulled out the contracts. $2 million in funding, 18 months to prove it works, and an office 2 blocks from Marcus Holloway's front door. Emma hugged him fiercely. Dad, this is insane. This is amazing. You're going to crush him. Language, Rachel said automatically, but she was smiling. Tell us everything. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Emma had done homework and Rachel had paid bills and Daniel had sketched code.